I made a slip of the tongue earlier when I suggested that Nationwide was on its way out as well as Barclays. Nationwide is probably one of the few banks in Britain that is actually safe. NatWest is the bank I was talking about. On the fifth anniversary of Britain's official departure from the European Union, a new YouGov poll suggested that Londoners are now decisively in favour of rejoining. And while the national picture indicates a slim majority, 53% support a return, the capital's response is stark, with 64% backing re-entry into the UK as opposed to 25% who are opposed. The findings reflect an evolving political landscape shaped by economic turbulence, regulatory burdens, and a changing public perception of Brexit's impact. And while the sample size of Londoners in the poll, 224 out of 2,225, necessitates some caution because of a potential margin of error exceeding these percentage points, the trend remains significant. London, which voted 60% to remain in 2016, has continued its pro-European leanings, bolstered by the region's economic reliance on international finance, labour mobility and cross-border trade. And the broader national trend, 53% in favour of rejoining as opposed to 36% who are opposed, reflects a growing disillusion with Brexit, particularly as its promised benefits have failed to materialise. Notably, 68% of Londoners now believe leaving the EU was the wrong decision, and only 9% regard Brexit as an unqualified success. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, has estimated that Brexit has inflicted a multi-billion-pound long-term blow to the UK economy, and although the financial sector didn't experience the mass exodus of firms feared in 2016, there is evidence of a slow puncture, a gradual but persistent drift of business and talent to financial centres such as Paris, Frankfurt and Amsterdam. And two-thirds of Britons now think Brexit is linked to the rising cost of living, with only 5% believing it has had a positive impact. Similarly, 65% view Brexit as detrimental to the economy, while 64% say it's harmed British businesses. Even among Leave voters, half concede that Brexit has negatively affected immigration levels, an issue the Vote Leave campaign once championed as a key rationale for quitting the EU. Those who are defiant will go on and say, well, it's because we haven't got the Brexit we voted for. Regulatory burdens and trade disruptions are everywhere. Beyond the public sentiment, Brexit's logistical headaches persist. Britain's post-Brexit border regime remains a work in progress, with the third phase of new customs regulations finally coming into effect after repeated delays. Businesses moving goods from the EU to the UK must now comply with stricter safety and security declarations, an added bureaucratic burden that runs contrary to the initial Brexit promise of cutting red tape. If you want to buy something from Germany, you're going to pay something, and then you're going to find you've got an additional 50, 100, 200 pounds to pay in all that red tape stuff. As trade friction increases, the prospect of rejoining the single market and customs union has been mooted as a potential economic remedy, but the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has ruled this out, fearing a backlash from Leave voters, and his cautious stance reflects the political reality that, while Brexit regret is mounting, the mechanisms of reversing it remain fraught with electoral and diplomatic challenges. And in the middle of Brexit's economic aftershocks, a separate but related issue has emerged: the resilience of Britain's banking sector. A new ranking of the world's safest banks reveals only three institutions, HSB, Nationwide and Barclays, compared to the dominance of German, Dutch and French banks in the top 10. And of those three institutions, some years ago established, only Nationwide is now seen as remotely safe. Brexit, of course, can be blamed for Barclays' demise or app outage. It can be blamed for NatWest's app outage. But basically, the country has gone into financial laziness, financial meltdown. Maybe just looking at Brexit as something to blame, or looking at COVID as something to blame, or looking at Putin as something to blame. It doesn't really matter. The problem is nothing is working. We can look around for a reason. Well, there is one reason: crying out, stinking. The 2008 financial crisis and its long shadow over global banking remain relevant, with increased capital requirements, stricter regulations ensuring banks are more robust than they were in 2007. But the economic uncertainty, the high-risk global financial environment, UK banks remain vulnerable to market volatility, sovereign debt concerns, external shocks, and Brexit hasn't done them any good. Liz Truss hasn't done them any good. COVID hasn't done them any good. Putin's war hasn't done them any good. But to turn around and say, oh, no, there are Brexit benefits, there's nothing. And London's overwhelming support for rejoining the EU is not merely a reflection of political preference, but a recognition of Brexit's economic and bureaucratic failure, the cost of Brexit. And as regulatory burdens increase, business sentiment deteriorates, the financial institutions navigate an uncertain landscape, the capital's pro-European stance is both economic and pragmatic. Whether rejoining the EU is politically feasible in our near future remains doubtful, but the conversation is shifting. With increasing recognition of Brexit's failures and an electorate growing restless with its consequences, London's voice in this debate may prove influential in shaping Britain's long-term relationship with Europe. And in the end, the question has to be, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe in Britain? Because if you do, I'm afraid you're in a minority at the moment. Safe economically, safe physically, safe in terms of health. Because what I see when I look around is chaos and fragmentation and fear and an inability to do the sort of things that in the past I could have done. And nothing is working. Nothing is working, and nobody in the system is speaking. They're all relying on farming out to advice centres and hiding. And it's the hiding, it's the deceit of the system which is killing Britain. Not so much Brexit, it's the deceit of the people who were behind Brexit that is such a danger.